So, welcome, Mr. Marc Bekoff. I'm so happy that you could talk to us tonight. I can see that we're almost 50 attendants right now, and I'm sure a couple more is going to join us soon. And you will be
Okay.
telling us about your newest book, The Canine Confidential. We
Yeah.
just had a little chat about it, and I'm just going to let you talk about it now.
Okay. Well, hello, you all. You can see me, but I can't see you. But that's fine. So I wanted to thank you all for attending. I've got some notes here, um, and many of you probably know that this is the year of the dog. So this is a great year to do all the wonderful things we can for all our companion dogs. Some of the basic messages that I'd like to get across, and I realize that English is not your first language and Norwegian is not any language for me, but I will speak slowly and clearly. Um, some of my goals are to help you become fluent in dog or dog literate. And I believe that it's essential that before somebody brings a dog into their life, that they need to know something, hopefully a lot, about dog behavior and also dog human relationships. I'm also not a dog trainer or a dog teacher. I look at training or teaching as educating both the dog and the human so that they can tolerate one another and agree about what we would call the give and the take and the trade-offs when a dog tries to live with a human in a human dominated world, because really the world is human dominated. And so one aspect of dog training that I like to stress is that people who do dog training or dog teaching um, understand dog behavior outside of the problem areas. It's really important that we understand what is, quote, normal or dog appropriate behavior. And then if some kind of problem arises, then we deal with them as they arise. And so basically, I'm asking people to look at the world from the dog's point of view, their point of view, how they sense the world. And I suppose we could say I'm asking people to step into their paws and their brains and their hearts. We really need to know how they see the world, how they feel about their presence in the world, and their emotional lives. So, what I wanted to do today is simply, go through some myths. I think looking at myths about dog behavior, and there's many, many myths, is a good way to learn about um, their behavior. So, oh yeah, I just saw that. Let me start off with dominance, because that seems to be one of the myths that causes a lot of problems for people. I don't know why it does, but it does. And then I'll just go through a whole list of other myths. Let me see. So I should say, excuse me, I'm trained as an ethologist. So my whole background is animal behavior, doing field work on coyotes, I've done work on wolves and penguins in Antarctica. So I bring that perspective to dogs. There's a lot of people who write about dogs who have really never studied dogs. There's a lot of people who write about dogs who have only studied dogs in laboratories. And so I've spent a lot of time looking at free ranging and feral dogs. And I've spent a lot of time, and some people think far too much time, at dog parks and on running and hiking trails. So I really basically try to understand the evolution and ecology of dog behavior in the same way that I would understand or try to understand the evolution and ecology of, say, wolf behavior or coyote behavior or penguin behavior when I was fieldwork in Antarctica. So that's my perspective. I see dogs as fully sentient, conscious beings. So people who wonder whether dogs are conscious or have emotions, I think they're just crazy. I mean, of course they do. I mean, it's it's the emotions that function as this social glue that draws us together. Pet rocks and robotic dogs just didn't make it. I don't know how they did in Norway, but they surely didn't make it in the United States because
Yeah.
people want to share, want to enjoy the shared emotions just like we do in our interactions with other human beings. So dominance. When I started writing this book and I started writing about dominance, I was shocked by some of the nasty emails that I got. I mean, people were really, as we'd say in English, in my face. They accused me of buying my PhD degree. They accused me of never really watching animals. And so I thought that there's something really wrong there. So there's been basically no animals. And when I use animals, I'm going to use non-human animals because we are human animals. There's no animals who have been studied who don't express dominance relationships or don't exhibit this. So the word dominance really refers to the ways in which we influence or control the behavior of another individual. So, dominance does not necessarily mean fighting. It doesn't mean aggression. It doesn't mean that animals are rolling over, submissively. But what it means more is that I'm influencing your behavior and maybe influencing it in a way that you might not like, but it doesn't mean that I'm beating you up or harming you. So that's a really important thing to get through is that dominance can be very subtle without any fighting. But what I learned from people who were a little more open about talking about why they didn't feel dogs express dominance, or why other people were resistant to the idea was that some people say, well, since dogs dominate one another, it's okay for us to dominate them when we train them or educate them or teach them. And I'm thoroughly against that. I mean, people like Cesar Millan and other people who are very hard on dogs are not in my fan club. And I've discovered that I'm happy that I'm not in their fan club. So it's a mutual dislike, if you will, not of the person. I don't know these people, but it's a mutual dislike of the methods that they use. So I don't know if there's any questions that are coming in simply about this. I think.
No,
Yeah.
not yet. I'm just, why is it so difficult for us to get rid of the belief that it should be violence involved with dominance, do you think?
Well, I think that because so many people who write about dogs or study dogs or who train dogs have not really been trained in animal behavior. I mean, so I've had people write to me asking me questions, which I think is really great. Does dominance always mean fighting? I mean, if I walk to you and you move away, and I walk to you in a very assertive way, then it's possible that I'm trying to dominate you and you feel that I'm trying to dominate you. But because I influence you in some ways, it doesn't mean that it's dominance. Another thing is that dominance is situational. So even in wild wolves and wild coyotes, lower ranking animals can get a bone or a piece of a deer or whatever food item it is, and they can keep it. And the higher ranking individuals don't necessarily try to get that object away from them. So that's why But like I said, I think the resistance is, and I've had some really well-known people tell me something. I mean, I wrote about it in my book too, where they'll say, well, we know dogs display dominance, but we don't want people to use this when they interact with their dogs. And I totally
Hmm.
agree. There's no reason to dominate or intimidate or shame dogs when you're trying to get them to adapt to our world. I mean, you know, so many dogs who look happy and content aren't, and um, they're really having a struggle to adapt to a human-dominated world. Somebody just wrote that I cannot see or hear you.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Is someone else having a problem, or if someone just confirms that they can see us now? A lot of people are writing.
No
Okay.
problem. Okay.
Yeah.
So the next myth is that dogs don't feel guilt. And once again, I mean, the easiest way to talk about guilt is that we don't know whether dogs can experience guilt and feel guilt, but I believe they can, and I believe that scientific research will show that they do. The main topic of guilt is a very difficult one for some people to understand because Dr. Alexandra Horowitz, who is also a dog, studies dogs and has written books on dog behavior, did a study where she showed that we weren't very good at reading guilt, but she did not even study whether dogs feel guilt. And so some of you who have read my book know this or other essays, because Alexandra is really upset that people say that Dr. Horowitz discovered that dogs don't feel guilt, but she didn't. What she discovered was that we're not good at reading guilt. And so we don't know. Um, the other studies that have been published on emotions that people question, like jealousy, but just within the last couple of months, there was a very interesting study published that looked at MRIs, magnetic resonance imaging, neuroimaging, that showed that when you create a situation where you would expect a dog to feel jealous, the same parts of the dog brain light up as those in humans when they're feeling jealous. So once again, when people say dogs don't feel guilt, we don't know that, and that's a myth. Another myth that I hear a lot is dogs live in the present, and that you talk about Zen-like dogs, and that we should all emulate or wish that we can um, uh, also live in the present. And
Hmm.
my answer to that is anybody who's rescued or lived with a dog who's been abused when they were young knows how hard it can be to get those dogs to behave normally or to like human beings or to like other dogs. Let me see. Somebody just said, how they feel guilt? How can we understand it? I mean, that's a great question. Getting back to guilt, I mean, one way that we can have they display it is it might be facial expressions. I mean, I lived with a dog for years who had a great life. I would take him running maybe really up to 20 kilometers a day each morning. He got the exercise. He was a happy dog. And once I came home and he had taken one of my jackets out of the closet, or maybe it was on the floor, and he peed on it. And it was the only time this ever happened. And when I came in the door, he rolled over submissively, which he had never done before. His ears were back, his tail was tucked. And the minute I saw that, I thought I didn't necessarily say, oh, he's guilty. But the minute I saw it, I thought he did something that he knows that he shouldn't have done. And I was right. There was one of my favorite jackets that was he peed on all over. So I don't know what happened. I didn't know if he was sick or if he had a urinary tract infection or a kidney infection. So you can look at it from a behavioral point of view and context to see a certain, look on a dog's face or a certain behavior, and then you discover that they've done something that they know they shouldn't do, if you will, then we call it guilt. And if we call it guilt in chimpanzees and gorillas and other animals, and including humans, we can call it guilt.
And this is, sorry,
yeah.
This is because they, by association, they see what has happened before and they expect the same reaction, right?
Exactly. Right. I mean, my dog, knew that he wasn't supposed. I mean, he knew he wasn't supposed to pee on my Parker, right? My dogs who have stolen food. I mean, I freely give them human food. I'm glad to have them eat bean burritos and rice and all that. But when they steal food off the counter, they know they're not supposed to do that. I'll simply tell them, if I catch them doing it, I say, no, don't do that. And or make it clear that this is not acceptable behavior, but not in a dominating way.
Mm-hmm.
And when they steal food, then they know that they're not supposed to steal food. I feel very comfortable saying, please don't do that, and then moving on. So
yeah,
yeah. Another one is that dogs love us unconditionally, and I just get tired of reading all these popular essays or even books that say that dogs love us too much and they love us unconditionally. Some dogs do. In fact, many dogs don't. And I think I'm not sure how to say it, it shortchanges and it really misrepresents who dogs are when we say that they love us unconditionally. I've rescued some dogs who don't love humans unconditionally. I've met some dogs at dog parks who never come to like humans other than the human man or woman who rescued them. And I've met some who even have trouble with the people who rescued them and adopted them. So that's just a myth. I mean, it sells books and it makes it seem like dogs really love us. And if there's something wrong with, if they don't, I've had people write to me, my dogs or dogs don't like me. Is there something wrong with me? And my answer is that I don't know you. And so something wrong with you, but it's not because the dogs don't love you. And I really mean that. So that's, a very important one. And another myth, of course, that goes along with that is that man's best friend, human's best friend. Dogs are not necessarily our best friends. And if you just look at the amount of abuse there is, I mean, I don't know what it's like in Norway or any of the other countries where you live, but dog abuse in America it's rampant, it's huge. So they're not our best friends. There might be a lot of humans for whom dogs are their best friends, but once again, saying dogs love us unconditionally and they're our best friends really misrepresents who dogs are. Another is that you shouldn't hug a dog. I was amazed when I saw this. There were some articles in some very popular papers like the New York Times and other popular magazines that say we shouldn't hug dogs. And I couldn't believe what I was reading. And so for me, of course, there's people who don't like to be hugged. So if you're going to hug your dog or a dog, make sure that you do it on their terms and know whether they like to be hugged. Most of the dogs with whom I live really enjoyed being hugged, but one dog in particular just wasn't sure. She had had a pretty rough childhood, if you will, and she just didn't like to be hugged. Slowly but surely, she would take hugs from me, but not anyone else. But once again, the myth is that you shouldn't hug a dog. And I gave a talk here in Boulder, Colorado, a couple of months ago, and a woman came up to me afterwards and said, "Thank you for giving me permission to hug my dog. When I saw these popular articles, I stopped hugging them because she thought that there was some authority." And her dog really felt deprived, hug deprived. So that was an example of how powerful popular media can be and how popular books can be very powerful in misrepresenting dogs and
Hmm.
perpetuating or extending the lives of these myths that are just, I mean, they're ridiculous. Are there any questions? No?
I could see someone was writing, but again,
Okay.
you're talking in your book. You're talking a lot about the fact that dogs are individuals, and that's what you're saying now as well. That we have to keep in mind that there is no such thing as one rule for all dogs. They're all different, and we all have to take care of that and adjust ourselves accordingly, don't we?
Yes, that was the next myth, that we can talk about the dog. No, we can't talk about the dog. That dogs, even among siblings, show a lot of individual variation. When I was doing field work on coyotes and looking at wild coyotes and wild wolves, when these youngsters come out of their den, they're really different. There's bold individuals, there's shy individuals, there's obnoxious individuals. There are some individuals who come out and you go, oh my goodness, I hope I don't have to see you again. But the main point is really that there's individual variation. And for me, one of the most exciting aspects of doing my studies in the field as well, not only in animals in captivity or animals at dog parks, is to come to understand these individual differences in behavior and personality and how they adjust to a human-dominated world. Some cope very well, some don't cope at all. And so this is an important message with a very practical application, because a lot of dog trainers seem to think that, well, here's the quote problem, so here's how we can solve it, without taking into account the individual personality of the dog.
Hmm.
Once again, if you've lived with or you've seen the behavior of very young dogs, not 2 to 3 weeks old, they're very different. So it's really important, because a lot of people want what we would say in English, these quick fixes. Oh, I need to solve this problem. How do I do it immediately?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose some you can deal with one trial or something like that, but some take a long time for dog to extinguish the response or for dogs to unlearn something. Then I had a problem with a dog I rescued that was very simple, and he would get up. I lived in the mountains, so doors were always open, and anytime somebody came to the door, he would get up and bark and go crazy. And I didn't mind him barking and going crazy, but it got a little too much. So I tried to deal with it, and I had no idea. And people would say, "Oh, come on, dog behavior. You should be able to deal with it." So I called my friend who's a dog trainer, and in 1 or 2 trials, she solved the problem. And it was all using, I don't remember the technique, to be quite frank with you, but it was all positive reinforcement. So, once again, there was a quick fix for this, but his behavior, because of the way in which he was reared before I rescued him, must have been where he was very unsure about strangers and therefore would bark. And he liked me well enough. And I think that since I lived in the mountains and I had a lot of land, my house and that land became his. And
Hmm.
so was he defending me or defending the territory or the house? I don't know. But anyway, the bottom line is that there is no being called the dog, and we need to honor that, and we really need to know that when we're trying to have them adapt to our lives, then we need to take into account the individual personalities. Somebody just wrote something in Norwegian, and I cannot understand. When you say
Yeah,
it's
but I think she's just discussing with someone else. Now there is one in English. Do you want
when
to
you say
read
it's
it
okay to
yourself?
hug the
Yeah.
dog, I think it's important to remember is show respect and not believe it's okay to hug the other dog. Yes, that's exactly right. And I don't know how to pronounce your name, but that's exactly right. That every dog is different and every situation is different. So that's why I say if you're going to hug a dog, you have to hug the dog on their terms and know that they like to be hugged. So what I tell people is if you don't know whether a dog likes to be hugged, then don't hug them. Okay. Um, and
And that's
yeah,
why
yeah, go ahead.
it's so important to know their language, that their calming signals and how they behave in order to know how the dog is reacting.
Absolutely. I mean, you know what it gets back to, Lisbeth, and all you wonderful students, what it gets back to is knowing dog behavior.
Hmm.
You know, I always say that when people go buy a dog from a breeder, which I wish they wouldn't do, go to a pound, go to a humane society and rescue a dog, um, they need to learn dog behavior. And while a lot of people agree with that, they'll say, well, if we make it too difficult for them to rescue a dog, then these dogs won't get rescued. I I cannot understand how people will want to bring a dog into their home and not know about dog behavior because it's so exciting to learn. And if they're too busy to learn dog behavior, then maybe they're too busy to have a dog in their life. I mean, I don't want to pass judgment on them, but I do want to say that asking asking people to become fluent in dog, if you will, or literate in dog behavior is not asking too much. I mean, I would hope that they would do it. So, so you're
I
right.
us I usually try to explain it to new dog owners that if you have an exchange student coming to live within your house for a year and he's a Spanish speaking person, I'm sure you would try to find a common way of communicating in English, or you would learn Spanish, but you wouldn't be totally ignorant to the language barriers. And that's what people, in fact, are if they don't want to study or read or learn anything about their behavior or their way of communicating with their body language, I think.
No, exactly. One of the things I love when I go to the local dog parks is to see trainers there who are just watching dogs outside of the problem area, not bringing them into their office and putting them on a doggy couch like psychiatrists might do, but rather just watching dogs. And it's essential for them to do that because it would be like going to a human psychologist or a psychiatrist who only knows abnormal behavior or behavior that causes problems without knowing what the norm would be. It's like not knowing cultural norms. So I think your example about an exchange student is great. I mean, I travel a lot, and a lot of people think the United States is just the only show in town, but we're not. And so when I go to different countries, especially countries like China or India or East Africa, for example, I have to re-educate myself. So it's a cultural type of education when you are trying to understand what a dog is trying to say to you, or what a dog is talking about, what a dog is trying to express their feelings, whether they're happy or whether they're sad or whether they need you or whether they're tired of you. I mean, seriously, whatever it is, you need to understand it. So once again, what I've noticed too over the years is because I've given a lot of dog workshops in continental Europe, is how Europeans are much more well educated in ethology and just the basics of animal behavior than in America. And I think that's because ethology has such a long tradition in Europe.
Hmm. Hmm.
Nico Tinberg and Konrad Lorenz and others. So right, and that's why when I say there is no being called the dog, it really informs so many different aspects of dog behavior. It just really does. Um, Another myth that I hear a lot You know, a lot of you probably know that I've studied play behavior in dogs and tried to understand how dogs and other animals play fairly with one another, how they can bite one another and jump on one another and mount and hump one another and do all these crazy things and still play. Okay, and I've come up with these rules that were, you know, using play bows, for example, like ask first, be honest, follow the rules of play, and admit when you're wrong. And, you know, we've collected a lot of data that shows that the vast amount of dog play is very fair, and they know how to resolve situations while they're playing when it gets too rough or out of hand. But one myth that I've heard a lot is that when dogs play fight, it it frequently or almost always escalates into serious aggression. And this is something that people use who don't like dog parks. They'll say something like, every time I go to the dog park, when my dog plays roughly or other dogs play roughly and play fight, it's going to break into or escalate into serious aggression. Well, it turns out that this is a myth, that there's been one formal study of it that showed that only about 0.5% of these interactions actually escalate into play fighting. And we collected the same data on dogs at different dog parks, and I tried to collect enough data on wild coyotes. So the real take-home message here is that if you know dog behavior, yes, we can be wrong, but if you know dog behavior, you can very accurately say that, well, they're playing very roughly, but it's not really true fighting. Mm-hmm. What happens a lot, and I've seen this a lot, and I don't think anybody's ever studied it, is that when humans step in, that's when a lot of the potential fighting or fighting occurs. So my own view is that dogs learn how to resolve conflicts, and one very important part of the socialization process is that they need to learn to resolve conflicts on their own. Their humans won't always be around, number one. And number two, you know, it's okay to get dirty. It's okay for there to be a growl or two. You just need to be able to read what's going on there. So that is a myth. Let's see. So a question came in, Victoria. Staying with the example of exchange, we expected to learn their language. What can we expect from the dog with us to learn and to communicate with us? That's a great question, Victoria. And that's where I come with this, that we're forming a mutual friendship and a mutual understanding and a mutual tolerance. So we can expect that if we teach them well, that they will come to understand that we love them and we want them to have the best life possible, but there's going to be trade-offs or this mutual tolerance in our relationship. So we give and take, and they give and take. And a healthy dog, I believe, and a happy and content dog may on occasion have to do things that they don't want to do, but it can't be one-sided where they're the individuals who are always giving something up. And you learn that by understanding your individual dogs. So when I lived in the mountains, I would put my dogs in the back of my Subaru station wagon, and I'd take them, and they could just run for hours free. But one of my dogs was afraid of the car, and she never, ever got over it. But she liked sitting in the front of the back part of the car, or the station wagon. She was okay. So what I did was I put her in first, and she was really good at defending her little pillow in the front of the back of my station wagon. So that's what we can expect from them, to tell us how they feel, and then they expect from us to help them along. I mean, that question from Victoria is really very central, once again, to successful training or educating or teaching dogs to live with us. It's central because it has to be symmetrical. That we tell them when they can eat, pee, poop, humps a dog, run around, do all the things. So we have to have a little latitude and tolerance, understanding that they need to be allowed to be a dog. They need to be allowed to express their dogginess, if you will. And my feeling is that the more they are allowed to express their dogginess, the easier it will be to have them not do it in certain situations where it could be harmful to them. So
Yes, that's my experience too. That
yeah.
when I show more understanding to them and I listen to them because I know their language and I know what they want, it's just much more easy to live together.
Yep.
A lot of people, dog owners, want to be in control of their dog the whole time, and in the case that you just explained, they won't even allow the dog to be in the front of the car because, well, there's no real reason. They just want to have the dog in the back of the car. So
Yep.
they don't really have a good relationship to start with.
Yeah, and it comes down to food. So later on, and this is great because I would love to have a more informal discussion. Is dogs shouldn't eat quote people food. I mean, what's people food? I mean, I'm vegan and I'm very happy to be vegan. And some of my dogs loved bean and rice burritos. Maybe you all know what those are. Good old Mexican food. They loved bagels or toast with peanut butter or almond butter. So I gave them some dog food that I thought was good because so much dog food that you buy off of the shelf in the store is really crappy food. And they did well forever. They lived long, happy, healthy lives. So that gets back to sort of understanding what they like. And we control when they eat and what they eat. So if you can show a little flexibility, then it makes it made it a much better relationship for me too with them, that I was more content that I didn't have to serve them the same old crappy dry dog food. Some liked it, some didn't, but I could put a little olive oil on it, or I just paid attention to how they were feeling. And so if I put down, I used to, because I study behavior, I used to do some little tests where I would put maybe two different foods that were good in a bowl. And then over time, notice that some of the dogs went to the same bowl all the time. So this is a no-brainer. This is not, you don't have to be Albert Einstein to know that they're expressing a preference. So it gets back to what Lisbeth was saying, and it's very important that if you understand what they like and don't like, and you understand and can honor their preferences, then do it. Some people have said to me, oh, but my dog is using me. Oh, but my dog doesn't love me. And I just think, get over it. Just get over it. It has nothing to do with love. It's like if you're in a loving relationship with other human beings. So you do things that they like, and sometimes you might prefer not to, but you do, and you hope that they reciprocate. So, I never felt used when my dogs wouldn't eat, a bagel with peanut butter and they preferred to eat a burrito with rice and beans. Some of my dogs loved carrots. So I'd give them carrots and they'd play with them and they'd wag their tail. And once when I had two dogs, they would play keep away. They both loved carrots. So it was fun. They weren't going to fight, but one would take a carrot and run to the other side of the yard and another would chase him. They'd put it down and they'd play these games. And I thought, isn't this great? Number one, it cost almost nothing to get a carrot. I didn't have to spend $20 on some stupid dog toy. And number two, they played, and then one would just almost look at the other one and eat it. And as to say, this is my carrot. Sorry. It didn't cause any stress. So these are really good questions because these are the ways in which you learn who an individual dog is. You learn what they like, and you learn that what they prefer and what they like might not be the same as what another dog likes, even a litter mate. And you do all you can to give them the best life possible. Another point that I like to make is that not only do dogs need physical exercise, they need to exercise their senses. They need to be allowed to sniff. Next February, I have a book coming out called Unleashing the Dog, and it's kind of like a field guide to freedom, a field guide for giving your dog the best life possible. And it's centered on the five senses. Dogs need to sniff. So this gets into how should dogs be walked? Well, the dog walk should be for the dog. I mean, I'm sure you see it, but I see it around too, where people are dragging their dog and the dog has all four, doing like a 4-paw stop. They're trying to sniff, they're trying to look around, they're trying to hear something, and the human being is in a rush and they're dragging them along the sidewalk. So my take is part of the trade-off, which gets back to that question about what should we expect from them, is we should expect from them to come to understand that they can't sniff for 3 hours, but to allow them to sniff. So we can expect them to understand, and they will. People have studied this, where dogs learn about the nature of a dog walk. You hear people saying to dogs, "Come on, you've got 3 minutes, so let's walk," and the dog has no concept of what 3 minutes is. But once again, dogs will learn that, well, there's a certain time involved. I don't know how they conceptualize it, but they're going to be allowed to sniff. So what I did with my dogs was, because some of them really it was very rare for them to need a leash or a collar, but I didn't have all day to be with them. So I would get up early in the morning and I'd let them out and they'd run around, and I'd take them down to a bike trail that was below my house in the mountains, and they could do whatever they wanted. And if I had an hour to do it, if they walked 10 meters, that's all they got. And sometimes they would walk towards town, which was like 6 or 8 kilometers each way. They could do that. And it was amazing how they learned that. They didn't have watches, they didn't have iPhones, they didn't have all these ridiculous electronic devices, but they somehow came to know that they had a certain amount of time to do what they wanted to do. And I admit I was fortunate because I lived in the mountains and I didn't have to have leashes and collars, but dogs need to exercise their senses. And people have actually asked me, I think I mentioned it in my book, that a woman once asked me whether dogs can feel deprived from not being allowed to sniff. And it's possible. I mean, I would feel deprived if I wasn't allowed to look around or hear certain things. And so who knows? But once again, when I go to dog parks, some of the most well-adjusted dogs seem to be individuals who are allowed to be free to do the things that they want to do. It wasn't people taking them to a dog park. I've had people say to me, "Oh, I love going to a dog park because my dog is free." And then every 2 seconds, they're calling the dog back and they're saying, "Don't do this and don't do that. Don't sniff there. Don't put your nose into someone's groin. Don't play so roughly. Don't do this." And, "Oh, I love how free my dog is." And I'm thinking, no, your dog's not free at all. Your dog might have actually more freedom in, their little doghouse. Any questions coming up? Because I'm going to roll through. I know we don't have that much more time.
Isn't it true also that if we give the dogs more choices, they become more independent and they can trust themselves and they get more confidence?
Yes. In fact, I was going to end with something like that, but no, this is good. Sure, you give the dog more control over their life and more choices, and they tend to be more content. Exactly. Number one, because they enjoy that freedom. And number two, because they once again learn how to resolve conflicts, or they'll know that they can choose, like on the walk, you can choose and you got an hour. You can choose and walk 10 kilometers or 10 meters, your choice. The walk was for them, not for me. And the confidence thing comes from when they learn how to have more control in their life. They get more choices, more control, more confidence, and more content. They're all words that start with C's. And you're right. And it's the same with people. Like if you have friends or, whatever kind of friendship relationships you have, when you allow them to be the people they are, it's better for both. It's a win-win for both. And dogs feel that. I don't think dogs abuse, that freedom, if you will, to make certain choices and be allowed to make those choices. And that's how, by giving them choices and a little more control, I would learn what they like to eat as individuals, you
Yep.
know. And I didn't feel like they were using me, that they didn't really love me, and that I should go to bed at night thinking that my dog is using me for food. It's like, give me a break. um, let's see. Yeah, if you have questions, that's great. I mean, I'm just rolling through here. One other myth is that it's not good to get down and dirty, as you say.
Shashti just had a question here from Shashti.
Oh, okay, let's see. As someone who's been active on the animal welfare scene for a long time, do you think the trend is that people? Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't know how to pronounce your name. Kirsty?
Yeah, the translator. She's the translator of the book.
Oh, thank you. How do you pronounce her name?
Shashti.
Okay, I'll let you go that. Okay, that's a great question. In fact, I was just writing an essay about this. Yeah, I think things are getting better slowly, but they are getting better. Last year, I guess in 2017, Jessica Pierce and I wrote a book called The Animal's Agenda, where we wrote about this, and we had a whole chapter on companion animals and pets. And I think things are getting better. They're not going fast enough for some people. And what we expect how we expect farm animals to be treated. I think things are getting better, but far too slowly for me. There's still rampant abuse. And I know there's rampant abuse throughout Norway and Scandinavia and other countries. So I'm hoping that the message will get out that when we allow animals, including dogs, of course, to be the individuals who they are and to recognize their sentience, if you will, that things will get better. One of the things I write about in my book, and I've written a lot about it, is having dogs fill what we call the empathy gap. Like, why do people have all these great feelings for dogs, but then ignore the feelings for cows and sheep and animals in zoos and animals in circuses? That's why I often ask, would you do it to your dog, when I hear people, talking about how they love their dog and sitting down and eating a hamburger from obviously a facility where the cows have been abused. So, Amy, I often let my dog decide where we shall walk in the daily walks in the woods. He's a schnauzer. Oh, thank you, Mimi. I appreciate doing this webinar, and I appreciate you being here. Yeah, I mean, there's a good thing. Yeah. Like, my dogs could sleep anywhere. My neighbors in the mountains were coyotes and black bears and mountain lions, so they couldn't sleep outside free, if you will. But I had a nice dog run that was wire link cage. It was a big cage, if you will, with chain link on the top and the bottom with a wood floor. So basically, no animals could get into it. So when it was bedtime, some dogs wanted to sleep by the fireplace, some dogs wanted to sleep outside in the kennel, I didn't feel hurt when I'd say, Jethro, where would you like to sleep? Some nights he slept on the bed. Some nights he slept on his dog pillow. Some nights he wouldn't come in after the night walk. And I'd leave him outside. And I'd wake up in the morning and he'd be just dead asleep, happy. Okay? There were a few times when he chose to go into the kennel and be outside and he started whimpering at night. So I got out of bed. It took all of a minute and brought him in. And then he could decide to sleep in my bedroom, on the bed, or by the fireplace. And once again, I wasn't hurt if he didn't choose me. I mean, you know,
So
like
what
I
do you
said,
think about the increasing use of cages? In Norway, people have their dogs in small cages inside their apartments all night and all during workday, actually. So altogether, they could be in a small cage for maybe 15 to 19 hours a day. And that's
I'm,
abuse by per definition.
yeah, I'm totally against that. I mean, I'm just totally against that. Yeah, I mean, it gets tricky. Um, and maybe because I know dog behavior and I've had a little more flexible time because I was a professor, so I had certain things to do, but I had more flexible time. Um, I've had people write to me, they've rescued a dog and they teach the dog that their crate is how we say it, you know, in English,
Yeah.
is a safe place for them. They leave the door open to the crate all day and they have to go out for a half hour and they put the dog in the crate, you know, for say a half hour, 30 minutes. And, you know, if they couldn't do that because they live in an apartment, you know, they otherwise take the dog out and run them. It's like I had a big outdoor run, and sometimes I'd be down at the university and I'd think, oh, I hope my dogs are okay. And I'd get home and they'd all, you know, either one or two or three would be sleeping. And when I go down to the house to look at them, they could almost look at me and say, would you stop bothering me? I'm fine. So I think it's very individualistic. But no, people who use crates or cages all day and during the night, it's not acceptable for me. I mean, you know,
Good, good. Yeah.
it just isn't. I don't want to, yeah. Let me see. No, I don't. Let's see. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot more to say here. Um, I, I mean, one of the things that I've written a lot about too is I'm going back to some notes I made special for this little webinar.
Hmm.
Is that let's see, is it yeah is that while we know so much about dog behavior, there's still a lot we don't know. So I think, you know, for you all, I think a lot of you, you know, do different forms of dog training. I think the most important thing to do, and I mean, I really mean that the most important thing you can do is just keep an open mind about who a particular dog is and what we really know from studies of dogs. Okay. I'm a scientist, but I don't worship science. So I'm very much interested in citizen science. That's what we call it. So when people, you know, if I have 100 stories about something, then even though the science hasn't been done or the science doesn't necessarily support it, I think we should keep an open mind because we still have so much to learn. But I think that as a dog trainer or a dog educator or a dog teacher, once again, to me, the most important thing is keep in mind who an individual dog is and keep in mind the relationship that they have with humans and have had with humans. Because some of the dogs I've rescued, I didn't know much about them. And I mean, maybe because I know dog behavior more than a lot of people do, but maybe not. Maybe it was just the challenge of saying, look, you know, I don't know much about you before I met you, but I see that you don't like certain things. Maybe you don't like being hugged, or you don't like people coming up and patting you on the head, going "good dog." Well, I don't like when people come up and pat me on the head and go "good people." So that's fine. But getting to know the individual dog is so critical, especially when you're a dog trainer, teacher, or educator. And it's like when I taught at the university, not all the students I taught learned in the same way. So if I expected everyone in the class of a couple of hundred people to learn in the same way, then I was missing the point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other, of course, is to convince people, and if, or maybe not convince them so much, but to show people how bringing your dog into your life is a very exciting thing. That you can, not only learn about, not only do you learn about the dog, but you learn about yourself. Every dog with whom I've shared my home and my heart, I've learned something about myself. And sometimes I go, oh God, you've got to change your way, Mark. This ain't working. Because the dogs told me it wasn't working.
So why did you decide on writing this book with these topics, the Canine Confidential? Is it the need for more, what can I say, more uh, heartfelt relationship between the dogs and the humans? Is that your main reason for writing this book?
There's not a main reason. I mean, because I've really been writing it for years. I write columns for Psychology Today for
Mm-hmm.
years, and some of the work in there comes from them. Um, my main reason was, among the main reasons was to dispel myths. I mean, I don't mean it in an arrogant way, but sometimes I pick up best-selling books on dog behavior, and within the first 20 pages, they're 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 just myths.
Yeah.
Dogs
Yeah.
always circle when they lie down. No, dogs
Mm-hmm.
don't always circle when they lie down. Maybe half the time. That peeing is always marking, and only males do it. No, that's not so. Um, dogs don't like to be hugged. So I'm a scientist, and I like to use the science to inform how we should interact with dogs. But really, what I want to put forth is showing how important it is, as you're saying it, to recognize dogs as individuals and to understand what's in their hearts and their heads. So to me, it comes down to a meeting of hearts. It
Mm-hmm.
really does. Understanding what they're feeling, how they express their feelings, and what we can do to make them the most comfortable as individuals. So once again, some of the dogs with whom I lived, we needed me more than others. But I
Mm-hmm.
didn't take it personally when some of the dogs just went, "Oh, that's Mark, whatever." No, seriously, when they needed me for something, they came to me.
Yeah.
And I'm not a particularly needy person that way, so to tell them I didn't need them to tell me how much they loved me all the time. I
Mm-hmm.
I understood that they loved me, and I understood that giving them burritos and carrots and tomatoes and bananas and peanut butter was a way to give them the best life possible, and that they weren't using me. So I wrote the book to make hopefully to show people that when we give dogs, like you said, Lisbeth, which I think is really a great way to sort of part of a conclusion here, is we give them choices, we give them control over their lives, and they're confident. So if a dog came to me when he or she wasn't feeling well, they knew that I would love them and I would do
Mm-hmm.
all that I could to console them rather than go, oh God, I'm going to go to Mark. And I mean, I don't know what's going on in their heads and their hearts that way, but the hesitancy, they come, one dog was limping. He was playing out in a field around my house, and stepped on a cactus, and when I looked at his paws, he had little cactus needles in them. I wanted him to come to me whining, knowing that I wasn't going to say, oh, he's just a wimp, knowing that he was really hurt and needed me. And the other is, you know, for people to understand how important it is to understand who dogs are. You know, that the appendix to the book is how to study dogs, sort of like made easy. I don't know if you all in Norway know what cliff notes are, but they're these summaries of books that a lot of students read. So instead of reading a 300-page book, they read a 3-page summary and stuff like that. So,
but the book has really a great reference list as well. Very, very good. You could do a whole study by reading your book and all the references in your appendix as well.
Well, like I said, you know, we don't have to embellish. I don't know how you would say that in Norwegian, but we don't have to make dogs individuals who they aren't. They have rich and deep emotional lives, and these emotions must be taken into account in all human-dog relationships. And as far as I'm concerned, they have to be taken into account when we train, teach, or educate dogs. I mean, it's important to know that dogs are smart and can learn certain things, but that's a given. You know, anybody who's lived with a dog knows that a dog pretty fast learns your particular routine, and you learn their routine. So it comes down to what they're feeling in their hearts and mutual respect. Like, I know the dogs with whom I lived, despite the fact that they had great lives, I mean, they were free most of the time, still were compromised because they were living in a human or mark-dominated, mark-controlled world. I had to. They couldn't run off because there were black bears and mountain lions. A mile away, there was a road, not a big road, but there were cars. I had a neighbor who did not like dogs, and I value that. I honor that. So they couldn't just run up and sleep on their porch, which they sometimes did, because it was almost like they knew that the people living there didn't like dogs. So they were going to show them how good dogs were, and maybe they would change their ways. I mean, I don't know that. But yeah, it really, really comes down to feelings, and that it's not soft or being a sissy, as they'd say in English, or non-male. You know, men have this thing sometimes about expressing compassion. It's not a matter of that. It's just a matter of honoring the fact that you're living with an other sentient being whose life means as much to them as your life means to you. And if you're going to bring them into your life, then you need to honor their lives with respect and dignity, and give them as many choices as you can in a, like I said, in a human-dominated world. So I wrote it for a lot of
goosebumps. I get goosebumps. I'm almost getting religious here. It's so true. I really agree. And I just want to tell all the attendants that we are soon to end. So if you want to write any questions, you have a couple more minutes to write them down.
If you have any questions, you can email me too. Maybe just no, feel free to. I really I really value this, and I know so many of you are really, really into giving dogs the very best lives possible, you know, in very, very positive ways. You know, I mean,
and I'm thinking, the way I'm thinking about my dog trainer school is that now we have 66 attendants here, and if all the 66 people can help 10 dogs, that's 660 dogs helped.
Yeah.
To a better life.
No, I mean, yeah. And like I said, you know, I mean, I always tell people, like, I know a lot about dog behavior, but I certainly don't know everything about dog behavior. And when I go to dog parks, I was just there last week doing an interview because I like doing interviews at dog parks, and I saw some behaviors that I'd never seen before, seen very rarely. So there's always something to learn. But if your goal is to give each individual dog the very, very best life possible, then you need to understand the dog and do it in ways that satisfy them. I just got an example. You mentioned in your book the dog. Well, it's a good question again, Victoria. I don't know. I mean, two of the dogs with whom I lived, I don't know much about their backgrounds, but they didn't like to play with dogs. They came to like to play with certain dogs. They had play partner preferences, as we say. I know wonderful people who aren't particularly social or playful. So that's just who they are. So what I've done, or I've seen people do, and I've suggested people do at some of the local dog parks, is bring the dog, and if the dog seems happy but doesn't want to play, don't make him play. And slowly but surely, some of them, they find a playmate who they seek out when they get there. I've got a couple stories in my book about Rosie and Sadie, I believe, who just they like playing with one another and they didn't like playing with other dogs. Big deal. I mean, there's certain people I really like, and it's not that I don't like other people, but I wouldn't choose to spend my time with them. So once again, it gets back to what Lisbeth was saying about giving them choices. I've heard people at dog parks say, "Oh, come on, you got to play," or "Come on, play with Bobby or Henry or Magnus here. They're wonderful dogs," and the dog is going, "I don't like them. I don't want to play with them." So don't force them to play. I don't know. Yeah.
Good. It's all coming down to choices. And that's how we solve a lot of the behavior problems as well, to give the dogs choices to build up their confidence.
Yes. It really does. Victoria's question also, is a good concluding question too, in the fact that dogs, like I hear people say, dogs love to play. If your dog doesn't play, then they're not feeling well or there's something wrong with them. No, when a dog's been abused, and like the two dogs with whom I lived didn't like to play, there was nothing wrong with them in that sense, okay? They didn't like to play, one became a player. But once again, that's another myth. And that's another myth that I think is important, that dogs always want to play. They don't. Neither do people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so this has been a very, very interesting hour. I think all the attendants will agree with me. I'm so happy that you could do this with us tonight. I'm sure. What time is it where you are?
It's just afternoon.
Oh, okay. So we are.
Yeah, I got up really early this morning and I did I bike ride, so I ride like up to 400 kilometers a week. So I went out this morning and I did a really nice bike ride to get oxygen in my brain. So really, if you have questions, feel free to send them over email, because I really, I mean, by the very fact that you're here, I assume that you're open to, talking about giving dogs the very best life possible and understanding that there's a lot we don't know. But, the bottom line, and we started off with this discussion of dominance, is, and I get in arguments. I've been doing an email exchange with somebody in France, and they just misunderstand people when they say that they prefer positive training. So what he said, and it was really upsetting, not that he was criticizing me, but a lot of people, he said that he thinks that people, how did he put this? This is a really important point to end on. He said that if you don't believe in punishment, then you don't believe in correcting dog behavior. And that's not true at all, because you can correct things in a positive way. if you have an argument with a friend, with a husband, a spouse, a lover, you don't beat them to death by telling them how wrong they are. You try to resolve it in a very positive way, and sometimes you try to correct their behavior because you feel that it doesn't serve them well. That has nothing to do with punishment.
No.
You know, I think if somebody tries to correct me and I think I'm being punished, I better get a life.
Yeah.
And so it's the same with a dog. Like, you're correcting them because you're trying to get them to adapt the best they can to a human-dominated world. But that's not punishing them. That would be like saying, when I lived in the mountains, that I trained my dogs really well to know when there was a bear around, just say. And I would always, I wrote about the story in my book. I'd always have food in my right pocket because I didn't want to yell, come, or please come, because I didn't want to alert a bear or a mountain lion that, you know, the dogs were here. So I was controlling their behavior, but I wasn't punishing them. I just realized that if they had an encounter with a bear or a mountain lion, it would kill them. I mean, it would be fatal. Yeah. So somebody might say, well, somebody said, well, aren't you punishing them because you're not allowing them to express their dog behavior? And I'm thinking, that was the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. Was I punishing them by yelling at them when they were going to run across the road when a truck was coming? So you all know this, but there's a real world out there. But correction doesn't mean punishment. So, yeah. Any more questions coming in? God, it's late there.
Yeah, it's 8:10. So it's not.
Oh, I'm awake.
Yeah, well, we're still awake.
Well, I want to thank you all. This has been great. I wish I could have seen all of you because it's weird sitting in my office looking outside at the mountains and talking into a screen with just Elizabeth. Like, Elizabeth is the only person here. But thank you.
But at least we have someone to look at. But it's a great way to be able to reach us all. So
I love doing these, and I realize that few of you could afford to come to a seminar or, you know, and you know, travel and stay in hotels and buy airplane tickets that are ridiculously expensive. So I really like doing this, and I'm honored by your all being here. So, you know, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and for all the attendants, Norwegian ones, we are possibly going to translate the Canine Confidential to Norwegian.
Oh, I hope so.
And we're looking forward to your next book as well.
I love Norway. I've been there before, and
you're most welcome back here, Mark.
I really enjoyed my stay. I was just in and around Oslo, and I went to that beautiful park that has all the sculptures.
Yeah, Vigeland.
Which I?
Yeah, Vigeland.
Yeah.
Vigelandsparken. Yes.
Yeah, I spent an entire day there, and yeah. Well, maybe when yeah.
We are starting up a dog trainer school in Bodø in the north of Norway as well. So maybe you want to come back and see the midnight sun next summer.
Yeah, I'm only going to come to Norway. Like when I've been in Sweden and in Finland, I've never been actually to any of the Baltic countries like Latvia or Lithuania or Estonia. But I'm only going to come when it's light because I need sun. And a friend of mine visited, what's the northern part of Norway? Tromsø?
Tromsø,
or Trondheim? Trondheim, is it?
Tromsø is the furthest,
Yeah, Tromsø.
up north.
So a friend of mine visited there, and he went mildly crazy, and he started drinking a lot of beer because it was just too dark.
It happens to a lot of people.
No, I would love to bring my bicycle there and ride a lot too. That was when I was in Oslo. It was for a week, and I mean, it was a lovely stay, and I really enjoyed the people. And there was some great vegan and vegetarian restaurants right in Oslo. But I've never been to Bergen, for example. I've heard that fjords are just absolutely gorgeous.
It is. It is. No, we'll take you around Norway, and I'm sure in Estonia and Latvia they will take you around as well. So you're most welcome.
Yes,
We're
I
looking
was.
forward to it within a couple of years.
Yeah, I was invited to Estonia by an animal protection group, but I couldn't make it. But I know they do wonderful work there. So anyway, thank you
Thank you very
all.
much, Mark.
Really appreciate you being here. And if you got questions, send me an email and I will answer it.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Okay, I don't know how to. Do you log me off of here?
I will end the event, Mark. I will just end the event for all of us now.
Good. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.